questions, I think, Veronica, I don't know how valuable it is to try and have a short discussion on race. I think that can end up frustrating folks often, but questions and some comments are also good. So I'm black, I'm from Oakland, born and raised in Oakland. My parents came out with the Great Migration. I was raised with a pretty clear consciousness around what blackness is in the context of Oakland, California. My mom graduated from high school, was a friend of Huey P. Newton, Oakland Tech, class of '59. My father grew up in Alameda in Oakland, went to Encinal High School. When I was younger, Oakland was its blackest in its history, about 48% African American throughout the 80s. Which we haven't seen since. We're in the 20s now. And just to kind of frame it, I guess, quickly, I'm very proud to be a black man, part of the African diaspora around the world. Because of the location I grew up in, blackness to me has a very special and precise definition and connotation, and it includes cross-cultural collaboration and love for the purposes of humanization throughout the world. That's how I grew up. I grew up with friends from all backgrounds with a particular set of ethics. And so I didn't actually grow up understanding blackness is anti a particular race, but definitely anti-oppression, anti-forms of ethnic supremacy, male dominance, those types of things. And I can go off and off on that, but that's not what I wanted to spend time on. I just wanted to kind of frame that. People understand ethnicity, in particular stereotypes of what African American culture is about differently. And I just like to always clarify that my upbringing was very particular and very special regarding growing up in the family that I did, in the city that I did, at the time that I did. So that's pretty important. Okay, so I guess to kind of frame, Veronica, I'm honored that y'all asked me to do this. I'm a strange person. I'm a Japanese animation fan. Like to ride motorcycles. I'm pretty solitary. I have tremendous social anxiety. Although if you're in education, you're not allowed to just kind of manifest your anxiety. You have to act like you don't have it. So that's what I'm doing right now. Okay? All right. So I guess a couple of things. So one of the things I teach a number of classes at USF, and I've taught at other places, as many of us at the professor level has had to. Well, not many of us, some of us. I came a different pathway, right? I wasn't sitting in respect to all my colleagues. I didn't go straight from my bachelor's degree into a PhD program and do research and then become a professor. I went the crazy route, right? And so when I teach classes and we get in discussions around race, I teach in a class right now called Race, Diversity in Higher Education. I like for folks to have a particular idea around this notion of race. And first thing, I like for folks to understand it kind of as this very useful psychosis. Meaning that, drawing off a kind of Franz phenomenon, this idea of the notion of race being an indicator of mental instability. That if you believe in the notion of race, you've been fooled into having a psychological disorder, essentially. That you cannot judge a person's capacity or their ability or what they're going to do or not do based on simply how they look and where you think they're from. But the installation of such a psychosis and mental disorder is necessary for a system that is trying to convince human beings that the harming and slaughtering and oppression of other human beings is somehow okay. So you need to find a way in which the installation of the psychosis of your order is actually internalized into the human beings that have to support that order or allow that order as normal. So as we get into dialogues around race, I always like for my students to understand that we're actually suffering from a mental disorder that tries to understand the motives of other human beings based on how they look, which is incredibly inaccurate and ridiculous. Now, culture is one thing. You can perhaps associate a particular set of cultures to a particular set of people based on where they might live or where they grew up. That makes a lot of sense. But that doesn't tell you a person's motive or what their goodness or their evilness or whatever it may be. So if we remember that, and then we understand that this notion of race and then the targeting of particular racial and ethnic groups depending on the flow of the weather or the flow of the economy at the time serves some type of larger system of maintaining a stratified order in terms of resources and opportunities, then we start to see that our understanding of racism and race is mostly in this bubble of economic depravity and scarcity and elitism and the concentration of resources in the hands of a few. And this idea of trying to get that whole system, both culturally and structurally, to seem legitimate. Okay? It's an illegitimate structure where you can justify the starving out and the slaughtering of human beings for the purposes of anything other than the well-being of other human beings. Okay? And usually we have very little justification on that actually being a reality. Okay? Historically, colonialism was about the accumulation of resources because certain locations lacked particular resources that they thought was important. That doesn't require slaughtering. It doesn't require the annihilation of peoples. But in order to get that done, you have to be able to justify it to folks that are both doing it and folks that are supporting the folks that are doing it. So why would I bring all that up? Is because, well, because of the need, right? And by the way, these are not my ideas, right? You can read this, this type of awareness goes back well over a century or two, right? The understanding, Columbus's first encounter with indigenous people and what they called Hispaniola, he identified these people of having no malice, not a sour soul amongst any of them, right? And you fast forward some years and they're being completely slaughtered, right? So this contrasting dynamic of a human encountering humans that mean no human harm, but being part of a system that still has to justify the slaughtering of those humans for the accumulation of resources. So in order to make that happen in any type of structure in which there is a ruler or a ruling class that is automatically outnumbered by those that must support their rule, you have to not just teach these ideologies, they have to be embedded in every element of your culture, from symbolism, street signs, signs in businesses, how people dialogue and construct language, how people are allowed to move, how certain people might have to get off the sidewalk when people are walking, or who clutches their purse when they see other people standing there, and no one checks them on, dude, why'd you even clutch your purse? Because it's automatically assumed it makes sense to clutch your purse, right? So we have this internalization process that has to be supported in every element of the society. So, in that supportive language, supportive messaging of this large psychologically manipulative and poisonous idea of racism, what we end up with is this question of legitimacy playing I'm sorry, does this sound too theoretical?
No, it sounds great.
Okay, I don't like to sound like a professor.
No.
Because most of the world is not in college. Right? I mean, right? Nobody's really, I mean, we think here, we're in the matrix here, like, we think everybody's like this, and if they're not, they're just stupid. But we got 44 million illiterate adults in the United States, and we got a highly functioning system to make people literate, supposedly. Including the president. I don't know if he's illiterate, but it can feel like that sometimes. So what we end up with, though, is this question of legitimacy. I'm sorry, I teach a class. I was given a class called Legitimacy of Power in Organizations and Societies. Does that sound like a fun class? Yeah. No, dude, no. It was designed by someone else way before me, and it was in her research area. It was really interesting for me, but if I was a student, I'm not taking it. So I had to shift. I shifted the whole class. And one of the things that's important, the reason why I bring it up, is because when we think of legitimacy, we think of our current president, former president, whatever president you want to think of. The legitimacy is simply about the alignment of values. That's all it is. You can make something incredibly unreasonable seem completely acceptable if you're able to align the values of the actor or actors with the constituency. I can say whatever I can do literally almost whatever I want, as long as I'm trying to make sure it makes sense to your value system. right? I can say that immigrants are sneaking across the border and we have to do something about immigration, while you can probably look around and know that a major portion of your entire economy requires that exploited labor. And so it's actually not about moving those people out. It's about making you believe they should be moved out. And if you believe they should be moved out, then there's no way you're going to fight for them having labor rights, which then keeps the economy flowing as it has nothing to do with moving those people out. And that's a value thing. So folks, I had a student in my class, I only teach graduate students, we're only allowed to in the School of Ed, and we working professional, and he said, my family's immigrants, and I just kind of feel like, and this is a man of color, he said, I actually kind of feel like they need to get in line, just like everybody else with all this sneaking stuff. I said, that'd be great if there was a line. No. That ain't how this country functions. This country ain't about waiting your turn and getting in lines. I mean, theoretically, because if there's a line, that means there's a efficient, effective process. If there's an efficient, effective process, that means there's a process for full citizenship for laborers. There's a process for full citizenship for labor. That means there's a process for them getting full labor rights and fair compensation. So you don't want to. I want a line, because I want folks to get their minimum wages and health care and et cetera. But a lot of folks don't want no line, because then you got to figure that out, right? And then you paying $14 for an orange, right? And then you're like, why in the hell am I paying $14 for an orange? And you'd be like, well, it's because we're paying the labor costs. Well, it's really not. It's because of profit margins. It's not really labor. So anyhow, the reason why I say all that is because in order for this to work, this has to be deeply internalized down to a psycho-emotional level. Right? To the point that the argument is always about you and protecting your family and your sense of integrity. And this is why the arguments get so emotional. Okay? This is why it's hard for people to discuss race, because they think they're talking about what is right in defense of their family. And often, in certain ways, they can be. But we often lose sight of the problem of the larger social order, right? That there is historical evidence of black and brown people taking jobs from white working class people. Plenty of historical evidence. Matter of fact, you can look from the 1800s into about 1929, you can see that happening routinely in mass numbers during the streetcar strikes of the northern part of the United States. Philadelphia, Chicago, etc. You can see it, okay? So folks have it in their history. I remember we went on strike, and all of a sudden all these Negroes and Mexicans get off the train, and they walk right in, right through our line, and take our jobs and compromise. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. Glad you'll never forget it. But what you don't realize is those were organized activities by both the mayor of the city and the railroad companies to go down to the South, mislead many, saying that there were jobs in the North, put those people on the railroads to come up, and many of them would not realize that they were breaking a strike until they got to Chicago. Why is that important? Because it creates not only just an emotional connection to this idea of racial inequity and people having their livelihood taken, but it actually creates a narrative to pass down from one generation to the next. And the whole time, these type of, you can read about that, I think it's Scott Norwood's book, Strike Breaking. But the whole time, there's an understanding of what I see is real. But what you're seeing is absolved from the actual story and the reality of what was constructed in this larger order. The idea of racial conflict being about one racial group taken from another racial group, none of them have money, is a very important narrative for us to ignore actually the real problem, which is a structure that relies on maintaining a portion of its population in abject poverty, others in unemployment. It's like when I tell my students, right? It's like you'll never have a zero unemployment rate, right? And that's Marx, yes? Marxian, yes? Karl Marx, yeah, right? Not Marxist, but Marxian, right? Okay, anyway. But Marx, right? Like, you'll never have a zero unemployment rate. Every time we look at unemployment rate, we're like, oh, it's down. Oh, it's up. It's down. It's up. But we don't say, damn, why don't we ever have zero? Well, of course you're not going to have zero, right? That's an old, right? That's an old Marxian critique of a capitalist structure, right? It's an old critique saying you can't have 0 or 0.1% unemployment in a place that is interested in a structure that is interested in maintaining control over the working class. You always need what Marx called, right, the reserve labor army. You need folks that are out of work and desperate to control the wages of the folks who are working. So when you say, I want a raise, they say, well, we'll fire you and get somebody else. So you always need that on deck. So if you're in a structure like that, and then you can actually convince people that the reason why these people are unemployed is because they're black and they're lazy, right? Or they're sneaking over the border and they don't deserve a job. If you can actually convince people of that, right? You're using all this emotional energy, these narratives from their grandparents and everything to literally maintain control over everyone. And that's how I like to discuss race. That's how I like to discuss race. I like to discuss it as people who have internalized ideas about folks that are actually very similar to them historically in their struggle. A country of immigrants. Cool. Then as I require my school discipline students, my students in the school discipline classes to do, you have to go and interview your mom and your grandmother, and even if they're still alive, great-grandparents, on what were their struggles in terms of experiencing citizenship and feeling like an American in this country. And what you find, white, black, Latino, Asian, don't matter, the stories sound very similar. Discrimination. I mean, what was it, back in the, early part of the 20th century, they used to say that the kids that acted thugged out, they used to say, stop acting Irish.
No.
Yeah, that's David Rodinger. His book, Wages of Whiteness, talks about that, right? This idea, like, look, there's always somebody. Like now it's like, don't have my child's acting black. Don't act black around them black kids, right? But it used to be, don't act Irish around them Irish kids, right? And then, but you'll have folks being like, I don't understand those people over there. Well, it's because many folks are disconnected from their class experience. They're disconnected from their working class immigrant experience. They're disconnected from the reality that the same system that is harming them is harming other folks as well, right? And instead of getting mad at the other folks, perhaps you should maintain that anger at the larger system. I want to make sure I'm not talking too much. Yeah, I think that, oh yeah, no, that's right. Okay, so I want to put that lens out there because this might sound a little crass, but remember, I don't really have my appreciation for higher ed culture is not, I don't have a strong appreciation. I mean, I'm a professor, yes, but I'm from Oakland, right? Oakland, California, surrounded by universities everywhere. It's kind of like Compton, right? You're surrounded by universities, but nobody knows how to fix it. So the universities must not be that special then. That's how I grew up, at least, right? I'm 2 miles from Cal. And we had Oakland, California average between 1984 and 1993, 138 homicides a year for a city of 300,000. It's a lot. And I didn't notice Cal or Stanford having any particular answers to that. So I didn't grow up, and I still don't have any particular celebration of higher education as a center of knowledge. So anyway, all that to say is I will sound crass for a professor, but I'm an educator first before I'm a college professor. And I would remind my students that, I used to teach in Santa Rita County Jail, maximum security for a minute, and I had a pimp in the class. And I didn't know he was a pimp. I asked everybody what they do for a living when they're not in jail, and he said, I sell dreams for a living. I didn't know what that was, right? I thought it was like a genie, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'd never heard anybody say that. I mean, it's something like out of a movie from like 1977, like a blaxploitation film or something. But I'm not with that. So I was like, I don't know what you mean. And then somebody else said he was a pimp, and And I said, so when are you gonna change that? He said, why would I change it? It worked, right? And I said, you're the essence of capitalism. You're perfect capitalist. Why would you change something that exploits when it works so well? Why would you alter? And so I would remind, this is crazy, but I would remind students both at the high school level that your system is a pimping system, right? Look, and pimps don't let the people that they're exploiting understand other worlds. Like you turn on the news, you don't know nothing about Denmark, nothing about Finland. You don't know nothing what's happening in Switzerland, nothing about Belgium. You don't even know what the hell is happening in Canada. You don't know nothing about any other country that's expanded its socialist programming to take care of its actual citizenry. So while everybody grows up, right, not grows up, but is taught, this is the greatest country in the world, right? But you get all this manipulation and not understanding that other folks are actually better countries. Of course they're better countries. We'll lose 15,000 people a year to gun homicides. We ain't even got no civil war. Like, how's that? I mean, come on, man. Like, how could you say this is the best country, right? If you only got 13% of your population is black and 40% of your prison population is black, you're actually not that equal. Yeah. If a quarter of the world's inmates are locked up in your land of the free, then you're actually not that good. So it would cause for folks, when they start talking about race in this country, to remember that you ain't never had to take a class on race, even though it's the fundamental theory that organizes your whole country. Yeah. You are not required to take one class on it, kindergarten through 12th, or to get a bachelor's degree in the United States. Yet it is the one thing that you need to know about. So when we get to the dialogue, we want to remember that a lot of people are very stupid around race. Okay? And even our understandings as people of color, okay, and marginalized folks around race is shaped by a whole legacy of pain and logical, rational defensiveness. Okay? So we have to be mindful of that too. That I get triggered when a white person talk about race. Because I'm waiting for you to say something stupid. That's what I'm waiting on. Waiting on you to say something stupid. Okay? And because what you're about to say, if it's stupid, I'm mad that you got the lid as long being that stupid about it. And then I'm connected to the fact that everyone around you might think it's okay for you to be that stupid or be that stupid themselves. Which means that you will not act like a human being in my defense. And where I'm from, I can't be around people that ain't going to defend me because my whole family has been a target from day one. Okay? So then folks, well, why are you so defensive? I don't get why you get so emotional. Well, that's your problem. You do not understand why I get so emotional. You can't sit through me yelling for 10 minutes? Are you serious? You can't sit through me yelling because you're triggered by me yelling? Do you understand what that means? How am I supposed to have an intellectual conversation with somebody that doesn't understand why my intellectual understanding of the situation provokes such emotion? See? And then we're expected to calm down and please. Okay, so with all that said, I'm not saying that people should not calm down in that conversation. They should.
At some point.
No, I'm dead serious.
Yeah,
right?
At some point.
To challenge such a system and an economy requires tremendous courage and great risk. Those of us on certain sides of this discourse understand that it is a requirement for those on the dehumanizing side of the discourse to be able to calm down and listen and take a risk. Be vulnerable. Are y'all following this? All right. And then people who are targeted, just like when we talk about gender. Hey, man, a lot of women, man, is tired of being calm about gender shit. Okay? Like, look, not one president in the United States has ever had to run on an anti-rape platform, including the ones that were trying to get the Democratic nomination as women. You ain't never heard a nominee mention our devastatingly problematic rape rate in the United States. Not once. And then whenever something comes up about some asshole in the news, some celebrity, some athlete, whoever it may be, being a predator, folks are like, oh, no, I couldn't do that. I think these women are a lot of that. So a lot of women get tired of fucking being calm around that. Okay? I understand that. Okay? But I also understand that if they start yelling at me for 10 straight minutes, I'm going to get triggered. So what's my job? I'd hope that they are calm when they're talking to me. But I got to take the risk myself and take the yelling. Because whatever the hell they yelling about, I ain't had to worry about sexual assault once all week. All week. And they had to worry about it their whole life. So if I gotta sit there 10 minutes and get my feelings hurt, well, fuck it, my feelings is hurt. That's the risk we have to take when we're having these dialogues. We have to be prepared yet again on the targeted side to have our feelings hurt in the conversation. And the people that are on the dominant side also have to be willing to have their feelings hurt in the conversation. And that's how I view discussions around race. Yeah, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Sorry for cussing a bit, you know.
We need to.
All right, so that's kind of like a broad thing, and I wanted to make sure that I put that out there, and I wanted to give opportunities for specific questions. Now, before that, let me say I'm not an expert on anything. I know in higher ed, everybody's supposed to be an expert on something. I respect that. I don't know what it actually means. I mean, real talk, like with scientists, like with natural scientists, like I get that they're, but it's still, you know, it's still Earth's things that they're studying. So you're the best expert we know of, perhaps. But if the plant could talk, the plant would probably be an expert. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Right. So you know, I know a lot about these things because I've been teaching about race since I was 22 years old, which makes me a little crazy. But I'm not an expert. I have responses. I would not argue that anything that I say is the definitive answer on anything. Right? It's just one person's opinion. No matter what our degrees are, what our certification is, and where we work, you're always listening to somebody's viewpoint as extracted from either research or just pure, you know, conjecture and opinion. So anyhow, did that provoke any thoughts in people, the stuff I was saying?
Oh, so much.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yes.
So direct questions, challenges, and brief comments, because I heard in the past somebody could take up 10 minutes before you know it, we're done.
I have a comment.
Sure.
Well, I don't know what's the comment or the question, because when you were talking about the strike workers, it came to my mind what they're doing now, the right to work states, where they are trying to break the unions, and workers are going to be paid less, benefits are going to be taken away.
Yeah, that takes us off on a side note, so I won't go into it, but that's a great point, okay? That's one of those microcosmic manifestations of a larger international agenda, right? Under free trade policies in World Bank and IMF policies around the world, around kind of suppressing unions and wages. So I think that's a great point. Yes, sir.
Just such a multicultural society here. Like my father, he's from Guatemala. He came, it was a civil war. I mean, his friends, their fathers were being shot on the street, gunfire every night. Somehow he made it out there. Well, his teachers, they said he had to go to America. His family abandoned him for it because they needed help on the farm. My mother, she came from Ukraine, which is, even then, it was oppressed by Russia, and she had to learn Russian instead of Ukrainian, and so on, couldn't learn her own native language. And they both came here, and like you said, they both had their own struggles, they both faced discrimination. But my father, well, he has dark skin, so it was a lot tougher for him, and he tries to explain that to my mother. She doesn't always understand. But I feel like they both shied away from really instilling their own cultures in me. You have to be American, whatever that is. Like just this mishmash. You love everyone, you're going to be American, you're not going to, you know, be bigoted or racist, and that, but I still feel kind of at a loss. Like, what am I really? And I wonder how many other people feel that way, who are mixed. Because it happens often here and there.
Brother, man, bro. Look. That's such a good point. Sorry, I jumped between. My professional presentation and my much more valuable black vernacular, right? So if I'd say something crazy, just be like, "What did you just say?" You know what I mean? Just ask me. But that's a huge point. So, if I may. Okay, a couple things. One, a great documentary for if your family's into watching TV, okay, is Balseros. It's a documentary. Google it. B-A-L-S-E-R-O-S.
Braceros.
Spell it for me.
B-R-A-C-E-R-O-S.
B-R-A-C-E-R-O-S.
Okay,
cool. Thank you. the great Lori Scolari always helped me out. Dr. Lori Scolari always helped me out. So that's a good film to watch around light skin, dark skin within the same nationality. It's really good. Okay, so here's the thing. Look, I want to get up on there, but I'm not going to get up on there. I'll get a second. Okay, just think of it this way. Think of it this way, okay? The idea of the melting pot of the United States, right? It's like viewed as like this stew where everybody kind of just jumps in, and that's not real. It's actually it's like that animated food movie. It's not like people are just jumping in the stew. It's like they're forced in the stew, right? This idea of the American identity, the history of its evolution is largely coercive by force. Okay, and you made a good point. You said, I wonder if other people are experiencing that. I mean, I think that experience, in many ways, is a major part of defining white identity. Okay, and then let me say this right really quickly that. I remember working with college students, and when we go around the room and people say, introduce themselves and identity, there'd always be a couple of students that say, well, people be like, I'm black, I'm Ethiopian, and da-da-da-da. People be like, I'm from Honduras, and people are like, wow. Then we get to certain white students, and they'd be like, I don't really know exactly what I am, but I'm just white. And there'd be like just a cool silence, like, okay, word. Okay, but okay, word, okay, because there's no anger to that. People are like, damn it, it's just like, no, word, right on. Okay, this idea of just white, right? Okay, what does a system have to do to a family that generations down the line they have no idea where they came from? Okay, I'm not talking about mixed heritage. I'm not talking about there's a bunch of stuff. I can't remember them all. I'm talking about literally, we are so disconnected from our Irish heritage that I can't really tell you nothing about it. Okay, and what we miss is the coercion that European immigrants experience in this country, the exploitation, the targeting, right? I mean, how do we get the railroads going clear across the United States without taking land from European immigrants that settled that land and they were told it was theirs? Okay? Now, we have the dialogue all the time, and we took land from the Native Americans. Yeah, well, who got that land, and now who owns it now?
The government.
Okay? In certain situations, absolutely, right? So we end up with a situation to where we have enough experiences in our families to talk about the injustices of the system and agree upon, okay, what needs to be done to create a more humanizing society. But you have to create a forgetfulness, like an amnesia, right? I mentioned David Roderick, but Tim Wise talks about it too, right? This idea of the wages of whiteness, right? That you get a wage for being white, and saying, right, I get all this privilege from being white, but you also paid a wage. You paid a wage in losing connection to not just your ethnicity, but the history of struggle within that ethnicity that would ally you with other people around the world. Okay? So there is a way in which people can be both. I mean, and by the way, the construction of the black identity was a response to this coercive, problematic labeling system. Right? So folks be like, why can you have black? I know people in here, this is Bay, people are pretty knowledgeable in the Bay. But folks be like, damn, if you got Black History Month, why can't you have White History Month? And then it's because people don't understand the evolution of those identities. Yeah. Right? White History Month is every month, every day. It's all day, every day, and everything. Right? Yep. Past folks out of the country. 1776, George Washington, everybody know that. That's white history. Yep. Okay? The fact you say, tell me about black resistance. Well, blacks, Harriet Tubman, you know what I'm saying? John Brown helped us, Nat Turner's Rebellion. That's the whole history, right? But that's the white version, right? That's a white history with black people in it.
Yeah.
Right? Because it gives the illusion that you had like 3 or 4 courageous black folks and the rest of them was like, man, why you starting trouble? You feel me? And the rest of them was just like, whoa, it's us, you know what I'm saying? And then we get these narratives around like stamina, and then all these white teachers and black teachers and brown teachers want to talk about resilience. You know, there's so much resilience. And then there's trauma, right? But there's no dialogue about fights.
Yeah. Yeah.
We fight.
Right.
Black consciousness is about black power in contesting white dominance.
And the black inventors.
Yeah, black inventors, black genius, right? And so, but if you're all in white history, you wouldn't know that, because white history and American history, you know, as they say, it's told by the victors, but it's also told to maintain victory. It's not just told by the victors; it's told to maintain victory. So yeah, I think those are huge points. Okay, and I always encourage people to just try and recapture their ethnic history. And by the way, I only brought that up. You brought it up, but I responded, so kind of I elaborated. But the reason why I went off on that is because what I want to say to you is that there's good reason why families tell their kids to just be American. Okay? It's not the pain that they're trying to avoid. The coercion and the suffering they're trying to help their kids avoid is something that we have to be incredibly critical about and really fight against. So it's not like parents, and there's black parents, Ben Carson, sorry. But anyway, you got folks that they'd be like, yo, just be an American. And they grow up Ward Connerly, if you know who that is. Like, I made it and I did it myself. And because they're trying to be in denial about the pain. Nobody wants to feel that pain.
Right.
Okay? Yeah. So I understand. I can't respect it, but I understand. I mean, I'm Oakland, right? I can't respect cats that run from pain. You know what I mean? Like, I can understand it, though.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? Like, I understand it. So it's not that people are like, we're ashamed of our background. It's that, look, I want my kid to have a better life. And where we come from, if you identify certain ways, you're likely to be targeted. So here's your opportunity in the land of opportunity to just be American.
Is that why many people ask him to speak English?
Yes.
Because I knew a couple, she was German and he was Filipino, and they knew their own languages, but they only taught English to their kids.
Well, you know, SF State used to have like, what do you call them? Those classes, like diction classes or whatever. Like my father had to take it because it's a part of getting that language out of you, right? At the time of the Atlantic slave trade, there was roughly 350 to 400 languages spoken on the continent of Africa. Okay, and folks talking in their own language is always a threat to a structure that needs to understand and surveil you. So you'll see the eradication of languages and accents embedded in the system. The idea that is put out there is so people can all communicate and function together. But if you want to do that, you'd have a model like Switzerland, and if you have 4 dominant languages spoken, you'd require 3 upon graduation of high school. But we don't do that. You barely need to know your own. Graduating from high school, we barely need to know English. You know what I mean? Take a class in Spanish. That's about it. But I'm going to hold you off a second. I want to make sure I get a couple of people's out. Okay? Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Not a question, but a comment about Neil Painter's book, The History of White People.
Okay.
Are you familiar?
No, I'm not.
And I saw this woman of color had this huge book. We're talking about, maybe you take your year to read it. And it's called The History of White People by Neil Painter, Nealpainter, scholar, the whole nine. And a lot of the white people that came to her openings were saying, is this your idea of getting back at us? She goes, no, I'm a social scientist. I'm a researcher. I go, can you even tell me where Caucasian came from? People couldn't even answer that question. So she answered all these questions about the idea of the stratification in whiteness and the idea of whiteness and how it came to be. And it was all constructed, socially constructed for people to come into this environment in U.S. This was all designed in a way to let people think that you're up here and people of color are down there without any evidence of DNA, because that wasn't done back then, right? So this book is pretty provocative. I actually used it for one of my thesis comments, and my teachers know what the heck I was talking about. But I think that her lectures online are really provocative.
And say her name again?
Neil, N-E-I-L, or Neil, N-E-I-L, Painter, P-A-I-N-T-E-R, The History of White People. It's a major doorstop, but there are videos on YouTube about her idea.
I appreciate that.
But what do you think about that?
So,
that's my question.
Well, let me say this.
You know you don't know what he did.